Thank you so much, Surya and Dr. Mitchell, for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and good morning, everyone. So UNDESA, as Surya was saying, is the Department of Economic and Social Affairs at the United Nations headquarters in New York. I thought I would share with you first who are we and what is it that we do. And what you see on the screen here is just the social development part of this big department and the issues that we cover there. And our team covers the issue around aging. So the program on aging, we're like 5 individuals, including myself in that team. And we're the focal point on this topic in the UN system at large, worldwide. And we do a lot of analysis and research of trends and suggest policy recommendations. And these are not published as publications, but rather as reports from the Secretary General to the governments, after which they hold intergovernmental meetings, negotiate and adopt resolutions that they commit to implementing in their national capacity, and we support those intergovernmental processes as well. And in parallel, we do capacity building work, a lot of training and workshops at the national and regional levels upon the request of member states. And Surya brought up the UN Interagency Group on Aging. So when I led the team back in 2018, there was a handful of us across the UN system that cared about this topic, and we did great work together. But I realized very quickly that UN staff move or retire, and I wanted to upscale and systemize this collaboration in a formal way. It took 2 years, but finally the Secretary General approved to formalize this interagency group on aging. We're 32 members right now. One of the more recent and fun members to work with was UN Tourism. We held a roundtable with them on aging and tourism. The UN Postal Union launched a commemorative stamp for older persons at the UN last year. And we have colleagues like Civil Aviation. I don't know how we'll engage them, but what the heck, we welcome them on board. So over several decades, it's both the numbers and the population share of older persons has risen globally, and in parallel, we've seen the number and share of children and youth begin to shrink. So by 2050, our projection shows that the total number of older persons will reach 1.6 billion. That's double the number that we had back in 2021. And of course, some countries are furthest along this demographic transition, like North America, Europe, Australia, and East and Southeast Asia, while others are in the intermediate stage, such as Central, West Asia, North Africa, and Latin America and the Caribbean. And other parts of this world are still in this early stage of the demographic transition into population aging, like Sub-Saharan Africa and Oceania, with the exception of Australia and New Zealand. And within this group, globally, the number of people aged 80 years or over is rising even faster than those aged 60 and over. By 2050, we anticipate that there'll be almost 500 million of people aged 80 and over. That's almost triple the number in 2021. And all countries, with the exception of Europe, North America, Australia, and New Zealand, will see that growth by more than 200% of where they are today. And within those exceptional countries, they'll see a range of growth of this age group between 10 and 60%. And women, on average, live longer than men, so they constitute the majority of this, more than half of this proportion, around 62% today. And what this means to us in terms of policies and programs is that they need to take into account the distinct needs and aspirations of this fastest growing cohort, which is those aged 80 and over. Societies will be older. We say this to governments, they hear us, but I don't think they actually understand that this is an irreversible global trend. And it's about moving towards, like Surya said, longer lives and also smaller families. And even countries that are relatively youthful today have virtually already started this transition. In 2021, there were 1 in 10 people around the world that were age 65 and over, and in 2050, we project that there will be 1 in 6 people. Also, the geography of the countries that have the oldest populations is shifting as well. So back in 1980, there were 10 European countries that had the oldest populations, and that was at 15% of their total population. And then in 2021, Japan had the world's oldest populations at around 30% of their total population. And we expect that by 2050, it would be China and the Republic of Korea that will be in the lead, with older persons constituting around 40% of their population. So between now and 2050, we're going to see a shift of these older populations from Europe into East and Southeast Asia. So this is not really only about the timing of the demographic transition, but it's also about the pace and characteristic of this transition. So we're going to see population aging progressing much more rapidly in developing countries than it historically did in more developed ones. When I speak to the government of Nigeria, for example, I tell them that by 2050, the number of older persons, number of older Nigerians will triple, and it will be more than today's older persons in the United Kingdom. Europe had the time and the setup, institutionally and policy-wise, financially, to prepare for this. These developing countries won't have that luxury. And an additional aspect that we're adding to our analysis in the team is something new that the UN discovered in updating its projections in July last year. You see, for a decade, we thought that there was a 30% chance that the world population would peak by the end of the century. And the latest update in those projections in July last year showed us that we were off. We're actually at an 80% probability. That means that the world will peak sooner than expected in terms of its population, and smaller than we had thought, around 700 million less people. And these things are interrelated with population aging, and we wanted to kind of take that into account. So there's no one solution, and remember, we serve 193 countries. And so we tried to divide them a little bit to help guide our interventions with them into 3 groups, and which you can see mapped out in the map here. So 63 countries, where 28% of the global population reside, have already peaked and will start to depopulize already. And these countries are China, Germany, Japan, and to my surprise, the Russian Federation. In 48 countries where 10% of the global population resides, we anticipate that they will peak between 2025 and 2054, like Brazil, Iran, Turkey, and Vietnam. And these countries should balance the demand of youthful populations, but also the emerging older one. And then in the remaining 126 countries where 62% of the world's population reside, including India, Indonesia, Nigeria, Pakistan, Canada, and the US, these countries will continue to see population growth into the second half of the century. And Canada and the US specifically because of immigration. Now, in addition to analyzing the total number of older persons, the share of older persons, the different pace and characteristics of this demographic transition, we also look at the extended lifespan, extended longevity, and we take that into account as well. So it's a huge success story. I mean, those who were born in 2021 are projected to live a quarter of a century more than those who were born in 1950. And women have a survival advantage, but to those who link aging with women, in our view, that relation won't last for too long. And we think that the gender gap will actually shrink as we see shifting in disease patterns. And since we serve countries all around the world, I was curious of what that looked like globally. So I looked into the data to see the countries with the lowest value of average life expectancy at birth and the countries with the highest values of life expectancies of birth, and there was a gap of 32 years between both. And this is why in our work we like to talk about, we think it's important to talk about unequal aging. The two babies at the bottom, if one is born in one of those two groups of countries, one of them will have the advantage of the possibility of enjoying 3 more decades of life than the other child, simply by virtue of what kind of access will they have to affordable and quality healthcare, to education, to income-generating opportunities, which will affect how long they live into older age and what quality of life will they have when they reach that older age. And based on our research, unless there's a swift change in policies, if policies remain as we know them to be today, we anticipate that future cohorts of older persons will likely be more economically unequal than they are today. So what is the decade? Since some of you don't know who that is, there's a short video that we can play here.
When it comes to aging, we can learn a lot from nature. Consider a tree. As it grows, its rings expand outwards, telling the years gone by. But those rings tell more than just time. If you look between the lines, you will also see how the tree's habitat and living conditions have impacted its life. The healthier the ecosystem, the more it will have thrived. We humans are no different. As we age, our physical and social environment provide us with vital resources, access to healthcare and proper nutrition, opportunities in education and employment. Safe housing and supportive communities become the roots that nourish our development and well-being. So what happens when we grow older if our environment does not sustain us? Just like a tree, our health declines and we struggle to flourish. Over time, we may become disconnected and a burden to others. The UN Decade of Healthy Aging aims to give everyone the opportunity to add life to years, wherever they may live. A transformative collaboration of diverse sectors and organizations, the decade focuses on changing how we think, feel, and act towards aging, cultivating age-friendly environments, creating responsive healthcare systems and services, and promoting long-term care and support essential to living with meaning and dignity. By adding quality to quantity, we give all people the chance to lead a meaningful life, no matter their age. And that includes you, and you, and you, and me. Together, we can make every year count, not by the numbers, but how we live and grow in between.
We're looking at progress in the first phase of implementing this United Nations decade, and it's great to see that it triggered activities and engagements by multiple stakeholders across the globe, despite countries being at different phases of their demographic transitions. And WHO, who are in the lead of this, did a survey of 136 countries, that's 70% of the membership of the UN, and found that in that early phase, they looked at 10 national indicators, and 4 of them showed an absolute increase of over 20%. And these are in legislation to access assistive devices for older persons, national programs on age-friendly cities, legislation on age-based discrimination, and national policies on comprehensive assessments of health and social care needs. But beyond that, I wanted to take a look at where is member states thinking outside the bubble of aging. And at the UN, I found that opportunity. You see, every year we hold a high-level political forum. There are 17 goals that countries committed to work on. And every year, around 40 of them deliver national reports on how well they've been doing in meeting those agreements that they've had together. We've analyzed these reports from 2016 to 2023. We're working on the update right now. That's around 370 reports. And we looked at how many countries thought of older persons in general. And when they did think of older persons and mention them, where did they mention them? And you'll see that 82% of references to older persons was under the goal of combating poverty, and that makes sense because here we're talking about social protection and pensions and so on. There's a mistake, and I'll update with the organizers. Clean water is mentioned twice. The correct one is 2%. The one that's 44%, that's actually combating inequality. That's where it is. And there we felt that older persons were kind of added to a long list of people that experience vulnerabilities, including persons with disabilities, children, and so on. So nothing super targeted towards older persons. The one that I found interesting was less than half of countries, when reporting on healthy aging, thought of older persons and mentioned them in that aspect. And then the third thing that I got from this is that quite appalling to see that only 2% mentioned older persons under climate action when you look at the heat domes and how it disproportionately impacted older person in British Columbia, Canada, in Europe. And the last thing that I got out of this, very quick look at these reports is that in some areas, governments make the connections clearly. Like you'll see 30% of governments thought of older persons when they thought of decent work and creating opportunities and engaging this constituency in contributing to the economy, but only 12% thought of them under education, where lifelong learning is. That's where reskilling, upskilling sort of takes place. And the last thing I wanted to share is opportunities for us to engage, and happy to discuss that in the next 2 days that's happening. Globally, back to the bubble of aging, all governments around the world commit to reviewing what kind of policies and legislations they have. It's a member state-led process, it's bottom up, so they start nationally, then they meet regionally, then they come to New York and we do the global review there. And it's a 5-year cycle that keeps repeating itself. And the outcomes feed back into the policy so that they could tweak them. This year, they've agreed on the modalities, on the outline for the next 5 years. Next year will be the national reviews. In 2027 will be the regional reviews, and then the global will happen in 2028. And we look forward to see this as an opportunity to engage with all of you, whether it's in the research, nonprofit, or for-profit organizations.
You want to just